For my convection cooking, the meat is going to be cooking in the water, and the water is going to transfer the heat to the meat. So I have the water as high as it will go. I'm going to put a lid back on the pan, and I'm going to cook the meat until it is done. And I know that it's done because I'm going to use a thermometer. In my convection, my chicken is ready to flip. And I know that it's ready to flip because I see white coming up on the side. And when I shake the pan or I move the chicken breast, it will freely move. When I flip it over, I see that I have a really nice brown crust. I'm going to put my slider screen back on there. And I'm going to turn my heat down just a tiny bit, because my second side is not as cold as my first side. For this cooking application, I have put my chicken breast into a preheated pan into hot oil, and then I have put a lid that is tightly fitting over the top. Here in a few moments, I will show you what my pan looks like, and we'll compare it to cooking the chicken without the lid. So now that my chicken has been cooking for a couple of moments with the lid on in the hot pan, I'm going to show you what it looks like inside of this pan. So if you look inside of this pan, there's a lot of water and a lot of moisture in the pan. The top of the chicken breast is white, and it also has begun to have more of a browning, or less of a browning and more of a boiled look to it. I'm going to take my tongs and flip over my chicken breasts, and as you can see, I don't really have a lot of browning on these chicken breasts. They have more of a boiled look. So now we want to look at the actual results of what we have accomplished from the different cooking styles. Our first, we cooked with convection, and we cooked that with just boiling. The meat has a gray tinge to it. It is very tender, and it just falls apart, but there is no browning. Our second piece, we cooked with conduction, with direct heat. We cooked this with no lid, a preheated pan, and preheated oil. We let the chicken cook all the way until it was brown on one side before we flipped it. And then when we flipped it, we were able to get caramelization on the other side as well. This piece of chicken here, we put into a hot pan, and we put it into hot oil, and then we put a tight fitting lid down. Within a few moments, we were able to see that the chicken was cooking in its own liquid juices. There's a lot of juice coming out on the countertop. It is juicy and it is tender, but it has the same grayish tinge as this one does. It's better because it was cooked in the oil than what was cooked in the water, but it isn't as browned as the one that had no lid with the hot oil. For this one back here, we started this in a cold pan and cold oil, but we brought it up to temperature. We had a sticking problem. So even when it was ready to flip, it still stuck to the pan. And then when we flipped it on the other side, at that point we had its own juices in the pan, even without the lid on, because there wasn't enough heat to evaporate to cause the browning reaction. So depending on what your purpose is and what your goal is depending on how you want to choose to cook your food product. And what I did this time with the chicken breast is I made lunch for my husband. I put some ham and a little bit of melty cheese, tossed it under the broiler for a couple of seconds, and I put it on an onion bun with some mustard and some mayonnaise.